I'd like now to move to Nick Stow, who is not only a biologist, but he's a sociologist, so I think he's probably pretty well placed to understand human interactions on the landscape itself. He has a PhD from the University of Ottawa, and in addition to his work, I think you must have had the pleasure of actually working in Nahanni Park, which must have been fabulous if you were actually there.
I would not pay to fly me.
Anyway, Nick Stow, please.
Hello, everyone. It's a genuine pleasure to be here. I love these presentations, and I love this group. I did feel some anxiety before this meeting. In fact, I was having a bad dream this morning as I was waking up. It was a dream in which I was trying to get here, and I was late, and I was trying to take a bus, and I didn't know which bus to take, and I couldn't get bus tickets because they're only doing Presto now. And it was just,
a fragmented dream.
It was a fragmented, and my pants were always falling down, which was but I guess it's a natural anxiety because some of you may not be aware that Erwin Dreessen has actually questioned me as a witness at an OMB hearing, and is very likely to do so again in the future. And I'm presenting a study on linkages with one of the fathers of landscape ecology in the room, and no one has seen this yet. And then I come into the room today, and I see Councillor Wilkinson at the back, and I don't know if Councillor Chernyshenko is still here, but I'm presenting information that is going to City Council a little later this month, which they haven't seen yet. So you're seeing some of this information before they do, which is why you will not get a copy of my presentation, I'm afraid. It does contain information that will be going to City Council, which Council has not yet seen. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is going forward to Council and as part of the comprehensive official plan review, and so a lot of it's conditional upon Council planning committee review, planning committee recommendations, Council review. So bear that in mind. I'm in a strange position because I'm I'm an ecologist working as a planner at the city, so I have to make do my analyses with planning implications in mind, one of which is that whatever I do is quite likely to be challenged by very intelligent lawyers at an Ontario Municipal Board hearing at some point in the future, which is a consideration that not too many people have to keep in mind. I'm talking about the city's natural landscape linkage analysis. This is actually a project that I had in mind when I joined the city in 2009, and which I've been trying to work towards for a while. But it also comes about as a result of policies in our official plan and an agreement, agreed settlement with the Greenspace Alliance regarding a challenge to a previous comprehensive official plan review. So in our official plan, we have a policy, it's part of our natural heritage policy, that says our natural heritage system will include linkage features, and in this case forest remnants, natural corridors such as floodplains, identified through planning and environmental studies as linkages between the significant features defined above, but which may not meet the criteria for significance in their own right. So we designate in our official plan, we have a schedule, and we identify significant woodlands, we identify significant valley lands, we identify significant wetlands, and these have a variety of policies in the official plan for their protection. So as we know, it's important to try and keep these features connected, and so we also have this policy that says where there are remnant features that may not be that significant in their own right, if they are helping to connect these other significant features, then they have to be considered as significant and they have to be protected. And then we had an agreement, as I said, with the Greenspace Alliance that came out of an appeal to our comprehensive official plan review that said prior to this ongoing comprehensive official plan review, we would identify and map existing and conceptual natural heritage linkages at a citywide scale including consideration of regional linkages outside our own boundaries, and that we would very likely do this in partnership with the National Capital Commission and the Nature Conservancy of Canada. And that, in fact, is what we've done. So we have actually contributed, we've been working very closely with the National Capital Commission on the Greenbelt plan, and we've actually made a contribution to the Nature Conservancy for the preparation of the Ottawa Valley Plan. In our official plan, we have some fairly new schedules that came in as part of the last comprehensive official plan review. Doesn't show up very well here, but this is one of our 3 Schedule Ls. So we have Schedule L1, L2, and L3 to the official plan. And what this schedule does is it shows most of the city's natural heritage system. It's the area that's sort of defined in light green there. It consists of a variety of types of features. It's significant woodlands, significant valley lands, significant wetlands. They're not displayed separately as different colors on here, despite Erwin's repeated requests that we do so, because we just found it became too confusing. But anything in green here on this official plan, at a minimum, triggers the preparation of an environmental impact statement if there's a development application within 120 meters of one of these green blobs. That's at a minimum. For other features, such as significant wetlands, there are also explicit and absolute prohibitions on development and site alteration, for example. So when we talk about natural linkages and adding those to our natural heritage system, these are the schedules that we're updating in our official plan. As I said, we have a commitment to consider regional linkages. We don't yet have the Ottawa Valley Plan. That's going to be available to us next week. So we identified going in our own regional linkages, what we thought were going to be significant. And so if we go start on the northeast and go clockwise, we have the Ottawa River East. So this is a link across the Ottawa River to the natural areas in Quebec. We come down, we have the La Rose Forest and the bog-to-bog connection that Gary was mentioning. Come further down, and there is actually from Osgood Swamp through, I always forget, it's not Bruce Mills, there's a little wetland there. We have a regional connection down toward the Winchester Bog. Down at the bottom, there's a regional connection down to the Limerick Forest. From the west side of Marlborough Forest over to the Goodwood Swamp Marsh area. And then two connections towards Pakenham Mountain, one that goes through the Panmure Alvar, which is a regionally significant alvar, and one that goes from the Burntlands Alvar. And then, of course, connections up to the Pontiac, and then at the top, Ottawa River west across the river toward to Gatineau Park. So those were the regional connections that we were keeping in mind in our landscape linkage analysis. And the idea here was that we would straddle the scale. We would straddle the scale between the National Capital Commission's Greenbelt linkages study and the Ottawa Valley's the NCC's Ottawa Valley Plan. So we would fill in that middle, and all of these 3 studies would be integrated together. It's a plan that actually we worked out several months ago. So this is the process that we have followed with for the city's natural landscape linkage analysis. Preparation, so what we had to do in preparation for it, the process that we followed, and what's likely to follow up. We started by just getting our data together. So one of the first steps was to update our natural land cover mapping. We used our 2011 aerial photography, and we contracted the work to Morrison Hirschfield to prepare new land cover mapping. The city updates its aerial photography every 3 years, so it'll do it again in 2014, and the idea is that we will repeat this process. We will do land cover mapping along with the aerial photography every 3 years, which also, by the way, will help us in our corporate reporting processes, so we can finally report on how much forest we've lost or gained over a 3-year period, how much wetland we've lost or gained. And then we have a whole set of base data that we've got from Leo and our own data and other sources. The first step in the process was deciding what our core natural areas are at the city and what we're trying to link. So we started with areas that are designated as natural environment areas in our official plan. We added in provincially significant wetlands, any other rural lands that are zoned EP, that's environmental protection. It's our highest level of environmental protection in our zoning bylaw. The core Greenbelt areas from the NCC. And then we have an older study, the NES study, Natural Environment System Strategy study, that was done by the regional government. We kind of found there were holes still in our core areas that had not been captured in the other categories, but which were captured by that old regional study, and so we've added some of those into our core natural areas, and you'll see those on the map a little bit later. We had to convert all of our base data to what's called, this is all done in GIS, and we had to convert all of our data to what's called raster data. And raster data is basically a checkerboard, so you take a map and you turn it into a checkerboard, and each square in the checkerboard in our analysis was 15 meters by 15 meters. So a fairly high level of resolution when you consider that the City of Ottawa itself is almost 3,000 square kilometers. We then produced using our land cover mapping and other information, we produced a movement cost map, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. From our movement cost map, we produced a cost distance map. And then using the results of that, we chose what we saw as being the general linkages areas where connectivity looked most promising and where we could best build on. From that, we identified, I put here corridors, and that's a technical term because it's in our GIS when you actually produce least cost corridors, that's the program. And then we actually identified those linkages. What we'll have to do in the future is we are following up with, this feeds into our comprehensive official plan amendment that's coming forward. So we will be asking council to add areas to Schedule L, and these will be woodlands or floodplain areas that are not yet identified as part of the natural heritage system that we think should be because of their linkage functions. And then in the future, there are a couple of projects that we have in mind. We would like to start working on a framework for improving connectivity in our rural area generally and how we can do that. And I think there's a pretty good master's student project in this actually, because we're really predicting areas where we think there's going to be wildlife movement, and it'd be nice to have a student follow up on that and actually see if we're right. So this is what we started with. It's the land cover map that we had 7 minutes? Okay, I better move quick. This is our land cover map. You can see it has various wooded areas, water, grasslands, wetlands, and so on. Once we had this, we then had to assign movement costs. Now, there are two ways to do this. You can focus on particular species or particular suites of species and look at how certain landscape cover types facilitate their movement across the landscape. We were not in a position to choose target species, so what we did is we've assigned movement costs or resistance costs, you could even call them, based on just general ecological principles and how much certain land cover types facilitate overall connectivity. So you'll see at the very top, natural covers, these have very low movement costs, so very low resistance to movement by any type of organism, generally, from white-footed mice to moose. Water, transportation costs, we looked at railway corridors and road corridors. We gave railway corridors a fairly low movement cost because it doesn't take an animal too much cost to move across a railway, and the railways are used so infrequently that they're not likely to get struck there. Road costs, of course, very high. This is all on a scale from 1 to 100. So road costs we gave a movement cost of 80, for example. Forests, we gave a movement cost of 1. Into developed areas, various types of developed areas, with the most heavily developed urban areas getting a movement cost of 100, so basically almost impermeable to wildlife movement. We're not really that concerned about raccoons. They seem to be doing quite well. Agricultural land, sort of a mid-range, about 30. And then we added some factors, some land use factors that need to be considered from a planning context. So, floodplains. Development is prohibited in floodplains anyway, so in most cases. So floodplains are areas where it's very good to improve connectivity. It's easier to improve connectivity. We wanted to favor floodplains, so we assigned a multiplication factor of 0.5. So the cost for a floodplain we just cut in half. Same for valley lands and watercourse buffers, areas immediately adjacent to watercourses. Prime agricultural lands, these are agricultural lands identified in the official plan as to be protected. We're not going to be improving connectivity across prime agricultural lands in any significant way because we're protecting those for local food security and other reasons. So we assigned that a cost factor of 2, made it twice as hard to move across prime agricultural land. Development reserve lands. These are lands that have been identified in the official plan as being reserved for future urban development. Some of them are still forested. So if we didn't consider that they've already been kind of pre-approved for development, we could be putting corridors through areas that are likely to be developed in the future. So we assigned those a cost factor of 4. So, and then country lot estates, there are approved and pending approved country lot estates that have been built and may still be built despite the current staff recommendation for a moratorium on country lot estates. And again, these are areas that may be entirely wooded right now, but which there in fact may be draft approval for a rural subdivision to go in. So we gave them a cost a multiplication factor of 4. So each of our 15 by 15 meter cells was assigned a total movement cost based upon all of those factors. Ranged from 0 to basically 0, less than 1, to 640. This is for the east side of the city. Green areas have the lowest movement costs, and red areas have the highest. We then did an overall cost distance analysis, and this is what you do is you take your core natural areas, you put them on your map, and then for each 15 meter cell, you say, what is the cost of getting from that 15 meter cell to the closest of my core natural areas? And then you get the program calculates that. Now what I've done is I've restricted this to the lower cost areas, and you can see it begins to create a kind of a network that can help guide where your connectedness may be more practical. A couple of things to note here. Now this analysis we did at a city scale. So one area is comparable to another area. And there's a couple things to note on this particular one. Is this my laser pointer? Does it work? Okay, first is that you'll see the Greenbelt, which François was talking about, there's Pinny Forest, right, Stony Swamp, and Leicester Road Wetland, Leitrim. There's not really a lot of potential there, as François was saying, at the moment for connectedness. It's a pretty tough area to move through. Leitrim Wetland down to Osgood Swamp. Similarly, right now, it's a tough landscape in which for connectedness. It's not great. But you can see we do have some really nice areas here, and of course a lot of the Greenbelt land you see is very well connected. So this was done at a citywide scale. Once we did that, this is for the south, so cost distance. You can see there's Osgood Swamp connecting down to Winchester Bog, Marlborough Forest. It's tough crossing the Rideau River. Remember the last slide? There was not in the Greenbelt area, not great connectivity, down south either. There's a lot of development along the Rideau River right there that makes it really tough. And in the west, it's looking not too bad. We've got lots of areas in the west. We have some good areas going across the Pontiac in the north. There's fairly good connectivity to the Carp Hills. This area was interesting. It came up really, really important, and yet there's very little that the city's done in terms of identification of natural areas and zoning in that area. Oh, this is so, 2 minutes. Okay, so this is the least cost corridor network. So what we did after that, once we identified sort of general areas, we then did an actual least cost corridor analysis. And so you take one core area and another core area, and you determine the lowest cost between those two areas. So in some cases, you're forcing a corridor through where one may not actually exist at the moment, but potentially it could. We made a couple of decisions. First of all, we forced corridor analysis through the Greenbelt to support the NCC plan, and in fact there is, it follows Black Rapids Creek, just as François was talking about. These are pathways within the city itself. We forced between Leitrim and Osgood because there was no other north-south connectivity on the east side of the Rideau River. So we wanted to see where that connectivity could go if we're trying to build that. There's the corridor analysis for the south and for the west, and none of it's particularly surprising. And then what we did was we manually drew in what looked like the best paths between these features. Following the least cost corridor analysis we did, we put in these center lines here. Okay, this looks like the easiest route, and then we buffered them out into 1 kilometer corridors. We said 1 kilometer is sort of a good width generally. It provides, within the corridor, if you can get a fully natural vegetated 1 kilometer corridor, it will provide habitat in itself for species, which is important, particularly for species with low dispersal rates. And then within that, you'll see there's some black areas that either within or overlap. These are the areas that we will be proposing to Planning Committee and Council that we add to schedules L1, L2, and L3 of the official plan as linkage features.
Do you have the West End version of that?
Yes, I do, Chris. There's the south, and there's the west. Now, so you see it's quite ambitious. What I really want to show you is some examples that, when I started off, I said these are existing or potential linkage areas. And this really illustrates this well. So this is, these are Carp Hills, South March Highlands. This is, I never have a good name for this area here. I always call it kind of Huntley area. But you'll see that some of our areas, our linkage, we've identified, are very, very well vegetated. They're pretty much intact. There's really nothing that we need to do there except make sure that no one sticks a pit or a quarry or a rural subdivision in the middle of it. We have areas like this that are about 50% natural vegetation. So these have moderate levels of connectivity, and in fact there's a landowner who lives just about here who tells me about the otters and other animals that she sees moving through this general area. So we've got some anecdotal evidence that these areas can function, and then maybe these are areas that we want to focus on improving some in the future. And then we have areas like this that really are more conceptual than anything else at this point. There's a river corridor here, a bit of a valley land and some floodplain that perhaps there can be some stewardship and some improvement. There may be some good hedgerows in these agricultural lands. Very tough to build on this in the future, but maybe we're looking out 50 or 100 years, maybe it does become feasible to do so. So that's where we stand at the moment. As I said, in June, there will be a comprehensive official plan report going forward to Planning Committee, and the areas that we would like to add to Schedules L1, L2, and L3 will be a part of that report. And then as we move forward in the future, we want to think about how we can work with private landowners, partners, on strengthening these connection areas so that they can persist and hopefully function better in the future. I think that's it.
Thank you, Nick.